I've been making my own whole wheat bread for 15 years. People love it. Throughout the years I've gotten numerous requests on how to make it. And today I'm going to show you how it's done. Put an egg in a measuring cup and fill the cup to the 1 cup mark with water. Add the egg and the water. Add 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 3 tablespoons of oil, 1½ teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of yeast, 3 tablespoons of gluten, 2 3/4 cups of white whole wheat flour. Set your bread machine for the dough cycle. That should be, on most machines, 1 hour and 30 minutes. And then press start. I allow the machine to mix the dough for about 2 minutes and then I check on it. The most critical part of making the bread is to ensure that you have the proper amount of moisture. Too little and your dough will be crumbly. Too much and your dough won't rise. I found that most bread machines don't do a great job in the beginning of the mix, and so you need to help them along by taking your fingers and pulling the dough or the flour that's sticking to the edges of the pan off the edges of the pan. Visually monitor how the ingredients are being combined. You'll probably have to add 1 to 2 tablespoons of water. As the machine is doing its initial mix, you may have to help it. I find they don't do the best job of getting the flour incorporated into the dough ball. So while the machine is mixing the dough ball, don't be afraid with your hand to push the dough ball up against the sides and help it incorporate the flour. After about 6 or 7 minutes of the initial mix, your dough ball should look like this one. It should be fairly smooth. There shouldn't be any flour or ingredients sticking to the pan. They should all be incorporated into the ball. Now you can let the machine do its work for another hour and 25 minutes. After the dough cycle is complete, your bread should look like this. Dump the dough out and shape it into a loaf. Place the loaf into a greased loaf pan. Turn your oven on to warm. Wait for the light to go out and then turn your oven off. Turn your oven light on and then place the bread into the oven and cover it with a towel. Let the bread rise a second time in the oven. It should take about 45 to 60 minutes. The concept is that you want to put the bread in a warm place to rise the second time. The temperature should be around 90 degrees. You don't want it hotter than 120. That will kill the yeast. After the bread is finished rising for the second time, remove it from the oven. Preheat your oven to 375. and then bake the bread for about 30 minutes. After your bread is done, it should look like this. After the bread has cooled, slice it with an electric knife. It's probably a good thing to wait 3 hours or so before you cut it. If the bread is too soft, it's hard to cut it evenly. It'll take a little bit of practice to get good at cutting it. I have 2 bread machines, and I make 2 loaves at a time. The bread that I'm not going to use immediately, I freeze it. It freezes well. A few important things that are critical to having your bread turn out correctly. Pay attention to the moisture content in the beginning of the first mix. And after a little bit of practice, you'll know what it should look like. You have to add gluten to the bread. Whole wheat flour doesn't have very much gluten in it. And if you don't add the gluten, the bread won't rise properly. I also strongly recommend using white whole wheat flour as opposed to red whole wheat flour. All of the ingredients in this bread are readily available at any large big box store. I usually get mine at the one that begins with a W. The white whole wheat flour says white whole wheat flour on the bag as opposed to just whole wheat flour. It's a major brand. You'll find it in almost any larger grocery store. The recipe for the bread is in the window below the video box. You can copy and paste it into a document file and keep it.